the We Knew the Moon podcast, where we love all things empath, spiritual, witchy, unexplained, and spooky. Hosted by me, Dee Safier, co-founder of the Goddess Temple Twickenham, and joined by lots of special guests. Hi there. This is We Knew the Moon, and my name is Dee, and this is where we like to talk about all things empath, spiritual, witchy, unexplained, and spooky. So today I've got Michelle again with me. Hi, Michelle.
Hello, Dee.
You are from Heartfelt Illustrations, so go check her out. All the links are in the social. And this is our second episode that we're doing together. It was actually our fourth of the season, but a second little grouping of episodes, because last time you talked to me about Friday the 13th and why.
It was fascinating, wasn't it?
So good. Why people think of it as unlucky, why we should reclaim it as a great day. So if you haven't listened to that episode, go check it out. It's amazing. Yeah, if you want to join us on Patreon for any amount, not only do you have access to all the audio and so forth, but you get full unedited video episodes of season 4. So you can see all of our hilarious reactions, all our faces. I pulled this face a lot. So you get to see that. If you're not on Patreon, sorry. So patreon.com/We Knew the Moon. And of course, we are the official podcast of the Goddess Temple Twickenham, goddesstempletwickenham.org. So do check it out if you are local to us. Got full moon guided meditations and new moon workshops, such as plant healing, crystal chakra healing. I'm really excited. I always start every episode like this because I start off overly excited. But Michelle, you don't know what our topic is today because I never tell my guests. I feel always a bit guilty because I make my guests tell me, obviously, because I want to make sure that it's something we haven't covered before. And sometimes I do recordings before they come out. So you wouldn't necessarily know, even if you listen to all the episodes, that I've got something in the pipeline. So I always know what topic my guests pick, but they never know what topic I'm picking. So today I'm going to tell you everything I learned about Ouija boards.
Yes.
All right. Because Ouija boards is something that I was like on the fence about. Didn't know very much about them. I never fucked with them. I didn't know whether it's right to be afraid of them. Are they bad? Why are they so scary in a way that other divination practices and ways of communicating with the spirits are not thought of so much, like pendulums and tarot and mediumship? And do they make people do bad things? Because, I love combining the spiritual side with the slightly true crime side. So I'm going to start with a bit of history about what the Ouija board is. So it's a board, like you get other board games, cardboard or made out of wood or marble if you're going for a fancy one. Think of like backgammon or chess if you don't know what I'm talking about. It could be like just a cheap cardboard thing or cheaper cardboard thing, or it could be like really fancy. Usually it has all the numbers and all the letters on it. And it normally has yes or no, and sometimes other things like hello and goodbye, like other little phrases. A planchette is used, which is like small little heart-shaped or tear-shaped piece of wood or metal or plastic, which is basically the pointer, which is used to point at the different letters or phrases. And participants get together in some kind of seance-y situation. They summon a spirit and they ask the spirit to communicate using the planchette, pointing, either spelling out words or numbers or saying different phrases. So the planchette moves across the board so the spirit can communicate with those present. So like I said, there's a lot of people that see it as bullshit, a lot of people that see it as evil, and you stay away from it. So I wanted to delve deeper into this because I don't know enough about Ouija boards. Have you ever used a Ouija board?
No, I haven't, but I've seen it lots in movies, especially movies that are horror sort of type, thriller type things. And you see people sort of using them. And I don't know if I actually believe that, Dee, I'm afraid. But you can tell me lots more about it.
So I feel like we started at the same place.
Yeah.
For me, I was like, either it's bullshit or it's evil. Either way, I don't want to have anything to do with it.
I don't think evil. I just think,
or maybe not evil, but something I don't understand, and I don't like to do things that I'm not that I'm not good at. That like I don't understand fully. I don't want to mess with things if I don't feel like I'm ready for it. So either it's that or it's bullshit. But either way, it's never been something I've been drawn to doing myself.
Yeah, me similar, actually. It never occurred to me to think about that.
Let me demystify it a little bit for you, because the first thing I learned about it when I was going into the history is that the Ouija board name is trademarked by Hasbro.
A gaming company.
So the thing is, there were similar apparatus used before, but Ouija is actually a brand name, kind of like tampons and Tampax.
Really?
Quite often we're saying Tampax, we don't necessarily mean the brand, we mean tampons. You know what I mean? Or like Band-Aids, more in the States. You know, there are different brands.
Human Hoover.
Exactly, where we use a specific brand name to refer to all of those products, whether we're using that specific brand or not. Very clever marketing by that brand. So Ouija board is the same thing. Ouija board is specifically this kind of device trademarked by Hasbro. So I just told myself, every time I get creeped out about Ouija boards, I'm going to remember that. Because Hasbro, for those of you who aren't very familiar, is the same company that makes My Little Pony and Mr. Potato Head. If you're wondering where the word Ouija comes from, because it's a very strange word, it's pronounced Ouija, but it's spelt kind of Ouija or Ouija. One of the theories was that it's a combination of the French and German words for yes, oui, and ja, but that's not true. One of the inventors of the board asked the board what it should be called, and the board said Ouija. But the crazy thing about Hasbro getting a patent is that it means that they had proven that it worked. So I'll get back to that. But basically, of course, before there were similar devices used by spiritualists, by mediums, and they had different names like spirit board or talking board or witches board.
Oh, right.
Yeah, but it was Hasbro that brought it into the mainstream more, and therefore into the critical eye of the church, making it taboo. But again, I will tell you more about that. So I found an amazing article on Smithsonian website by Linda Rodriguez McRobbie, The Strange and Mysterious History of the Ouija Board. And a lot of my research on the history is from this article. So it was very good. So what came before the Ouija board, the sister game to My Little Pony? Although almost every culture has some kind of ritual for communicating with the dead, including Catholics and Christians. If you don't think they do, then why are they praying to saints and asking for the saints to hear them?
Well, yeah, absolutely.
Right? And asking for signs from the saints. Although the history of what we now commonly call the Ouija board is a bit blurry, it's thought to have come into prominence in the 1800s when there was a real uptake in spiritualism. At the time, spiritualism was not seen as being mutually exclusive to Christianity. Even Abraham Lincoln held seances at the White House. His 11-year-old son sadly died, and he and his wife started doing seances and so forth. Also, life was tough in those days, right? Life was tough, and it was not long. So people had a lot more loved ones that had passed.
Yes.
People were looking for a quicker and easier way to communicate with these spirits. Because imagine, one of the common ways before was the spiritualist or the medium sitting there reciting the alphabet and having the spirit knock at each letter.
Right.
So even spelling out a medium name, even spelling out like my name, Deanna, for example, would take fucking forever because you're having to go A, B, C, D. I mean, I would probably fall asleep, even if it was a very loved one trying to communicate with me.
Being the spirit on the other end of that.
Yeah.
Thinking, oh, for fuck's sake.
Yeah. How can I minimize this? You know, like a telegram. So I can imagine that made the whole process a lot more boring and a lot more time consuming. I mean, you'd be there fucking hours if they had any kind of long message.
You would, wouldn't you? Yeah.
So they were trying to sort of like work around this. And that is when people started mass producing this specific board with the letters on. So at least the spirit can go through the letters far quicker than this knocking technique. And the board was originally mass produced by a company called the Kennard Novelty Company. They had read about these talking boards and decided to make some cashola. So in 1890, this guy Kennard got some investors to set up the company purely to start producing these talking boards.
Gosh, and they must have thought they were going to be popular enough.
Right? So they weren't necessarily spiritualists. They were businessmen, which I found really interesting.
Yeah.
Because you and me both count ourselves as spiritual. We both count ourselves as business women, right? In that we have our own business and we need to make money to pay bills and we like a comfortable lifestyle.
Yeah. All of that.
It raised the question of whether this is okay. Does it matter if they're producing something that you want and need at a price that you can afford, if they don't themselves necessarily believe in it? Is it preferable if it was someone spiritual who was making it? But what if there's no spiritual person who's got the inclination and the motivation and the skills to do this at this time? So maybe by the community, for the community, is not always possible.
It's a good question, though.
You know, there's a lot of theories, especially about like the healing practices and services and readings and so forth, about how much you charge for it.
Yes.
And, you know, if you charge too much, does that take you away from your spirituality and make your gift lesser? But then what about something like this where you mass produce something? Say it's writing a book or producing a deck of cards, or in this case, a Ouija board. And you mass produce it because the demand is there and you get rich off of it. Is that okay if you're spiritual and you believe in it?
I think it's okay to produce something that people want. Like
in this case, they're producing it, they're mass producing it so that it's an affordable price. So that,
like back to the tampon thing that you mentioned, I'm sure it's not just a female-led company, but men may never use them.
Yeah. So it just brought up a lot of questions that I know come up a lot in the spiritual world about charging for your services.
Interesting.
I don't have the answers for that. I always think it's a useful topic. For me, I think if you are not ripping people off, if you are being authentic and being open and honest, and people want to buy your shit, fucking let them.
As long as it's not snake oil.
Exactly. They always marketed it as for entertainment purposes.
Well, there you go.
So is that their default, their get out clause, right?
Yeah.
So basically, the people involved in this Kennard Novelty Company, they had a dilemma because getting a patent meant that they had to prove, is it patent or patent? Patent.
It depends on the country, doesn't it? I think we say patent.
Okay. Well, you guys know what I mean. So getting a patent meant that they had to prove it worked. But luckily, one of the investors was married to someone who was actually spiritual. Her name was Helen Peters. And she is actually the one who asked the board what it was called. And the board said Ouija. And when she asked what Ouija meant, it said good luck. So they brought Helen Peters to the patent office when they filed for their patent. And the chief patent officer said that if the board could spell out his name, which they did not know, he would grant the patent. So he was doing a little test. And apparently it spelled out the patent officer's name. Whether this was calling on the spirits, whether this was a story relayed by the investors, or proper research done by the investors before going to the meeting.
I think that might be it. You would anyway, wouldn't you? You would, if you were going to a board meeting, you would find out the names of the people you were going to speak to, wouldn't you?
You would have thought. So who knows? It's possibly a combination of those, you know, exaggeration of the story.
Yeah. Or to promote the product. This is what happened. This is how we launched it. It worked.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the result was that they were granted the patent in 1891. And by 1892, they went from one factory to 6 factories in the USA and 1 factory in London.
No
so within
way.
1 year.
Everybody must have been buying them.
Yeah. I mean, this was a time where seances and mediumship was really, like I said, it was actually quite popular and not yet frowned upon by the Christian institutions. So the boards were an instant success. In fact, the only people who didn't like them so much were actual spiritualists because people thought they could now access the spirits directly. So whether they thought that it was dangerous for people to do it without proper knowledge of what they were doing, or whether they were just pissed off because they're losing income. They must have lost so much money because it wasn't a case of let's get that medium back in. It was let's buy a Ouija board and do it ourselves now whenever we want.
Do you think it was like when televisions came and cinemas probably panicked?
Yeah, probably, because it's like it's competition. So the Kennard Novelty Company kept on expanding. I mean, did you think that this was how this story would begin?
Absolutely not.
Right?
No clue. This is blowing my mind, actually, Dee.
I know. I could be telling you, like I said, I could be telling you the start of the board game Monopoly.
Yes.
The company kept on expanding and was brought into the Fold Company and later the Parker Brothers and then finally Hasbro in 1991. So for us, that feels really recent. I get that it's like 30 something years ago now. But so it changed hands a few times. So the Kennard Novelty Company were probably like, hooray, we've made millions. Let's sell out and go and, let's sell the company and go live in the Bahamas or wherever they did. And so eventually it landed with Hasbro in 1991. The World Wars, the Great Depression, etc., brought even more hard times and even more lost loved ones. So sales kept on going up and up and up during all this time. Oh. Apparently, over a 5-month period in 1944, so tail end of World War II, a New York department store sold 50,000 of them in 5 months. So an interest in the spiritual world, a desire to communicate with their lost loved ones. In 1967, it outsold Monopoly.
No.
You can't imagine it, can you?
No.
Right?
No. No, that's amazing.
But then, 1973, a few years later, happened to the Ouija board. So you might be thinking, what happened in 1973?
I was born.
You were born, which is great for all of us, but I also don't think it directly affected sales of the Ouija board.
It might have done, you never know, Dee.
Maybe. Unless you were somehow linked to what also happened in 1973, The Exorcist.
Oh, the film.
I have an episode back in season 3 with Sarita on exorcism. So if you want to go back and listen to that, I cover the case that The Exorcism was based on. It's actually a boy called Roland Doe, I think. And The Exorcist, the film, it was actually a female, acted by the fabulous Linda Blair. At the time, the film The Exorcist scared the ever-living shit out of people.
Apparently, yeah.
It was very little like it before. It tapped into people's fears on all angles, especially because it was based on a true story of a boy who was possessed after playing with the Ouija board. And this was depicted in the film as well. If you've never seen the original Exorcist, and there's been remakes and sequels and all kinds of stuff, but we're talking about the original one here. If you've never seen it, I recommend watching it. Have you seen it, Michelle?
Do you know, we've said before, I'm not a fan of horror. I avoid at all costs.
Yeah.
No.
I'm on the fence with horror films. I need to be in the right frame of mind and state of mind. Yeah. Otherwise, I can't. But when you watch any of these films that were really game changers in popular culture and society, always try to watch them without the filter of modern cinematography, right? Because remember 1973, they did not have the special effects that we have now. So it might look a bit hokey now, but just remember that at the time, it blew people's minds. And again, the subject matter was so terrifying. Ouija historian. Did you know there was such a title, Ouija historian?
I didn't, but nothing will surprise me now, Dee.
I mean, he might be the only one, but Ouija historian Robert Murch summed it up amazingly. It's kind of like Psycho. No one was afraid of showers until that scene.
Yes. What a good way of putting it.
Yeah, because
it was this film that created fear of Ouija boards.
Yeah. So
before that, it was a fun game.
It was a fun game or a genuine way to communicate with your loved ones. And I'm sure there were opponents to it, but it wasn't the mainstream view of Ouija boards. And it was mainstream because I just talked about the sales, outselling Monopoly one year.
Amazing.
It was not in itself an evil tool. Before we had CGI, filmmakers had to make us scared of everyday objects.
Yes.
Right? Like the showers and simple weapons like knives and whatever. So the result of the exorcism is that the Ouija board popped up loads in scary movies. We already talked about it. It's always the precursor to bad shit happening, right?
Right, of course.
I mean, how many times have we seen it in different films and shows? It's always like naive teenagers trying to have a bit of fun and scare each other and then accidentally summoning a terrible poltergeist demon type thing. At this point, different churches start speaking out against the Ouija board as a means of summoning demons. I don't think the church was particularly happy about the film The Exorcist as well, because it doesn't really portray a lot of Christianity-related things very positively. Okay. And there's, you haven't seen it, but there is a scene. There is a scene where she pleasures herself with a cross.
Oh, really? Well, no, that would upset them, wouldn't it?
Yeah. So...
Oh, that's unfortunate.
It is.
She says not caring a jot.
Yeah. I mean, it's an uncomfortable scene, regardless of what your religious views are. But the exorcism just was a massive hit, and the church was not happy about it. And again, it was linked to the popularity of the Ouija board. Okay. So I imagine sales went up dramatically as well after. I imagine there was a huge chunk of people watching the film going, ooh, let's try it, you know?
Well, also, on that point, though, there wasn't a lot of film memorabilia.
That would have been the merch.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the church starts being a bit more proactive about being anti-Ouija boards. Now, Ouija boards are still selling, but now they're kind of seen as a creepy, spooky item, not like a spiritual thing like tarot cards or pendulums. Yes. They've gone over to being a bit more frowned upon the generally.
Dark side.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In 2013, Hasbro released a more mystical version of the game as their main board was glow in the dark. That's tacky, right? Like fabulous, but tacky. Yeah. So I looked in the UK Hasbro shop online and I couldn't see any Ouija boards. So I checked on Amazon and I couldn't find anything from Hasbro. So I Googled it, and they even have, you can imagine, Ouija boards, like they have Monopoly boards of different cities and themes. My Monopoly board is a castle's Monopoly board, but they've got a Ouija board for Stranger Things, the show. But I did find a picture of the original design, the glow-in-the-dark design. Do you want to see?
Oh, yes, I do. I do want to see this.
Most of us have got an idea in our minds of what a Ouija board looks like, right?
Yeah, I'm thinking the arch of the letters and the numbers.
This is the box. This is the planchette.
Ooh.
So you can see ages 8+, 3 to 4 players, you know? And then here we've got an example of the board itself, right?
Mystifying Oracle.
Mystifying Oracle. So you can see this one is a William Fold talking board set. So that was Fold company that bought off the Kennard Novelty Company. So this is an older set. But yeah, you know, we've got this curve of the letters, very spiritual looking pictures and so forth.
It even looks like a board game, doesn't it?
So do we want to talk about how they work, and do they even work?
Yes, please.
The common consensus by scientists is that we, the humans, who are very much alive, the participants that are powering the planchette. So, of course, there's going to be people that are playing jokes on their friends and, you know, moving the planchette themselves. We know that that happens. We're not talking about this. We're talking about the ideomotor effect. You heard of this?
I haven't, no.
First,
idiopathic means not real. So ideomotor, is it? It's like, and you can't give a reason for it. So you can have idiopathic rashes that don't appear to have a reason.
Okay, well, right. I think you're on the right track.
That connection.
Motor is like motor skills, movement, that kind of thing. So yeah, you're on the right track. First written about by physician and physiologist William Benjamin Carter for the Royal Institution of Great Britain. He examined the automatic muscular movements that we do without conscious will. The things we can't help, like crying, or sometimes things we don't even know we're doing, like a tic. And in 1853, chemists and physicists looked into table turning. So this is precursor to the Ouija board. Participants used to put their hands on the table and the table would shake. My table shakes because it's shoddily built. They used to have these seances where the table would shake and move and go up and down. Yeah. And that was supposedly the spirits communicating to the participants through moving the table. But he was trying to demonstrate the impact of ideomotor actions on the participants. So it's a non-conscious movement, and the Ouija board is done in a group. So it's a combination of everyone's non-conscious movements, small non-conscious movements by numerous people on a very small item, the planchette, which is often on castors or kind of wheels to help it move around. Yes. So you can imagine the smallest little movement that you're not even aware of, combined with someone else's small movement. So you're like, well, I didn't move it that way, but actually these other two people are moving it this way unconsciously. So it makes the caster move in that way that neither of you are pushing it unconsciously.
And then you would begin to believe that something was happening that you hadn't controlled.
Yeah.
So when you've got group belief, yeah.
Exactly.
That's where we're going.
That is exactly where we're going. So is it a scary way to contact the dead? Is it the ideomotor effect? Is it a combination of the two? But let's say it's not spirits and it is our non-conscious movement. Is it still a useful tool? Like with the tarot cards or horoscopes, whether you believe in them or not, people still read them, turn to them, and so forth.
Yeah.
And they still sit there and analyze whether that applies to them or not, whether it's true or not. So is it like these other techniques, even if you don't believe in the spiritual element, is it still a useful self-discovery tool?
I think it possibly could be. Again, it does depend what you personally believe, and if for you that's an important belief and it helps you to move forward positively or make positive choices, then I'd say it appears to be a useful tool. It's up there, isn't it, with the placebo effect, with the like we talked about, the unconscious bias. It's there as part of our being as humans.
Thank you for an amazing segue, because you said if it helps you go on to positive things and make positive choices, then is it a useful tool? Possibly. So now I'm going to talk about some people who used it and did not make positive choices as a result, because I wanted to combine my fascination with the spiritual world and that of true crime and look at some cases involving Ouija boards.
Oh, right. And so these are true crime stories.
Yes.
Right. Go on then.
There were hundreds to choose from.
Oh my God.
Which isn't a surprise when you think how popular and mainstream the Ouija board was, right?
Right. There must be loads hanging about still.
A lot of the next case is from an article called The Chicago Ouija Trial on the website Providentia. This story starts with a burglary in 1919 at the house of Albert and Clara Yost. They came home to find that money was missing, as well as other stuff. So they called the police, but clues were really limited. I'm guessing it just not much came of any investigation that might have happened. So this was on the 19th of November. And then soon after, the Yosts had friends over for Thanksgiving. They had a Ouija board, not a surprise, because everyone seemed to have one. And it was something they did regularly. They counted themselves as like sort of amateur spiritualists.
They'd have people round, have dinner, get the Ouija board out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they had Thanksgiving dinner with their friends, and then they got out the Ouija board and decided to ask the Ouija board who committed the burglary.
Good gracious.
The planchette spelled out the name of their neighbor, Frank Walters. It also told them that his wife, Lydia, had helped him. These were their neighbors and very close friends. Now, the Yosts, the victims of the burglary, did not tell the Walters that they suspected them of the burglary, but they did tell other people. So it took the Walters a few months to find out that these rumors were going around that they had committed a burglary on their neighbors and friends. And when Lydia found out, she was fuming. You would be. She requested that the Yosts formally retract the rumors in the local paper. Clara refused to, and the Walters filed a lawsuit against the Yosts, their guests, and the Ouija board for slander.
They actually believed that the Ouija board, as its own consciousness, told them something that was false.
Yeah. So they were suing for $10,000, which I imagine in 1919 was a fair amount of money. So the case went to trial in 1921, so 2 years after the original incident. And it took ages for them to find a jury because they were asked if they believe in ghosts. And if they said yes or no, they were dismissed because they have to get people that don't have a strong opinion either way.
Oh my God.
I know, it's funny. It's funny. At the end of the trial, the judge stated that the Ouija board had no legal standing to make accusations, so the Ouija board itself could not be sued. The jury concluded that while the Ouija board had lied about Mr. and Mrs. Walters being thieves, the Yosts could not be held responsible for slanders made by their board.
So even they accepted that this board game told the truth, i.e. like it was magical.
They believed that the board...
lied, but they believed the board could speak, basically.
Yeah. The judge is saying that you can't sue the Ouija board because it doesn't have a legal standing, but the jury is saying the Ouija board did tell the lies, but we can't blame Mr. and Mrs. Walters for believing it. So yeah, they were saying the Ouija boards and not the guests were the ones that spelled out the Walters name.
How did they establish that they didn't do the burglary?
They must have in the trial concluded that the Walters were not the ones that committed the burglary, that the Ouija board did work, but the Ouija board lied. But it's not the Yost's fault for believing the lying Ouija board.
I don't think there'd be a trial like that now. I think it would get laughed out of court, wouldn't it?
Well, you say that.
Oh, no. Go on, no.
Well, no, this one's only a little bit later. But there's another article on Providencia again called The Ouija Defense. So November 18th, 1933, a 15-year-old girl called Maddie Turley shot her father with a 12-gauge shotgun in Alabama. So this is a tough one anyways, regardless of why and whatever. Yeah. He died a month later from his injuries. Maddie and her mother, Dorothea, were both arrested. Dorothea was arrested because she had instructed Maddie to kill her father based on instructions from a Ouija board.
Right.
So whether or not she genuinely believed it or not, we'll get to that. But either way, she's saying the Ouija board told me to do it, so I had it done by my 15-year-old daughter. Let me go into a bit. First, Maddie said that it happened by accident, that she tripped and fell while holding this massive shotgun. But finally, she confessed that her mom had asked the board whether to kill the father or another specific man. Maddie and Dorothea were both obsessed with Ouija boards. Right. Dorothea was interested in another man who is referred to as the cowboy. She was interested in the cowboy. And it seemed that she asked the Ouija board for help to decide between the cowboy and her husband. But for some reason, she asked the Ouija board to help her choose by telling her which one she should kill.
Why would either of them need to be dead? I mean, I can vaguely not understand because that's the wrong word, but you can sort of see if there wasn't divorce available to a certain extent, you can understand. But why would she kill the lover if she were going to keep the husband?
Yeah, so it's problematic. Yeah. Maybe she's not trying to make excuses for this lady. It's awful. But maybe she had to be around the cowboy a lot. Like maybe she had feelings for both. And that's obviously why she was struggling to choose. And so she wanted the one that she couldn't be with to not be around. So she wouldn't have to look at them, think about them.
To go to the extent of getting your own child to do the task is her own father. What 15-year-old would go, yeah, Mum, I'll shoot Dad for you. What?
Well, Maddie was also obsessed with Ouija boards. Obviously, she's got that from her mum. Maddie got sent away. And after appeals, Dorothea was set free. I think by our tone, both of us see Dorothea as actually, she didn't pull the trigger, but she's the...
She pulled the trigger. I mean, I know she didn't literally do it like you said, but she is responsible adult in this situation.
So Dorothea was set free on the claim that the jury was swayed by the fact that she might have been having an affair and therefore was morally loose. Again, remember 1933, rather than the actual facts of the case. So she appealed and said, you guys have made judgments against me because you think I've had an affair with the cowboy and made the judgment based on that rather than the facts, which if that all of that is true, is not lawful and not correct. The facts of the case are that she told her daughter to kill her husband. So yeah, anyways, she tried to stay in contact with her daughter, but her daughter wanted nothing to do with her. I'm presuming at this point she's had a little bit of realization about how she was manipulated
Yes.
To do her mother's dirty work. The mum, Dorothea, went on to sue the reform school where Maddie was for supposedly turning her daughter against her, which the term for that is alienation of affection. Maybe you alienated her affection when you made her kill her own father for you.
Yeah.
So that was a really weird case.
Oh, wow.
And finally, there's an article by Laura Kahn in the Reader's Digest, the best academic journal in the history of time, in my opinion. It's called Chilling Crimes Involving Ouija Boards. This reminded me, of a story about when I first moved to this country. I was 7 years old when I moved to England, and we lived in a block of flats. We lived in a flat for a while when we were trying to find a house. And we had a readathon week. Do you remember readathon?
I do remember readathons.
So for those of you who don't know, it's normally like a week long or something, and you were sponsored for however many pages or however many books you read. And we had a really wacky neighbor upstairs, like an elderly lady who used to give us sweets in the hallway and stuff like that. And yes, I know what that sounds like, but in 1990, we were far less aware of things like that. Well, she said she would sponsor me if she could choose what I would read. And then she gave me a bunch of back copies of Reader's Digest and sponsored me to read them. I was 7.
Oh, gosh. And yeah. Oh, there's some of that was very dry.
Very dry. But then also I remember there's like, the agony aunt section, which was all like bored housewife problems and stuff like that. I mean, it's totally inappropriate for a 7-year-old, but it was an education of sorts. So anyways, back to this article in the fabulous Reader's Digest. The first story is about the murder of Clotilde Marchand. But I actually got more information from the Forest Lawn website, which is the website of the cemetery in Buffalo, New York, where she's buried. So she was the wife of Henry Marchand, who's a French artist and sculptor. And he is fairly well known because he studied under Rodin, who did the Kiss and the Thinker, these amazing sculptures, right? I'm going to show you a picture of Clotilde. I love her because this is the picture, her with her dog.
Oh, I love the dog.
I know. So she was also an artist. And in the early 1900s, they moved to the US and he started working for the New York State Museum and he started earning some recognition. They later moved to Buffalo, which is further inland in New York, the state of New York, with their children. Henry started getting close with one of his models. Let me show you Henry. This is Henry.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And he started getting closer with one of his models, Leela Jimerson. Here is a picture of Leela.
I like the cloche hat.
The cloche hat is fabulous. So on the 6th of March, 1930, Clotilde was found dead by one of her sons. He found her on their first floor landing, and it was initially thought that she fell down the stairs.
Right.
But the medical examiner found bloody gashes, the odor of chloroform, and signs of a furious struggle. So at the time, this was branded as the scandal of the century. The police questioned husband Henry and Leela Jimerson, his close friend.
Yes.
And also a friend of hers, a friend of Leela's called Nancy Bowen. Bear with me while I bring up a picture of her.
Okay, yeah.
You might be wondering how she factors into this story.
Yeah.
Because Leela named her as being involved when she was arrested. Leela, the model / mistress, we'll call her, convinced Nancy, who was a tribal healer, that Clotilde was a white witch who had used her magic to kill Nancy's recently deceased husband, Charlie. So Leela convinced Nancy that Clotilde killed Nancy's husband, Charlie. Charlie has the best nickname I've ever heard. His nickname is Sassafras Charlie. Apparently then, Leela and Nancy consulted the Ouija board about what to do about Charlie's death, and the spirit of Sassafras Charlie told them that Clotilde did kill him, and then Charlie gave them Clotilde's full address, which I feel like is all stuff that Leela would know, and I'm kind of feeling like she was the mistress and wanted the wife out of the picture. So it's thought that Leela manipulated Nancy Bowen, who couldn't read, So she wouldn't even know what the board was saying.
Witchy board.
So Leela wouldn't even have to move the board to spell. She could just wiggle it around a bit like, oh, yeah, it's saying, yeah. Clotilde killed her husband. Oh, she lives at blah, 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 blah Boulevard. So she didn't even need to spell out the words, really. She could just say, yep, this is being spelled out. Ooh, yep, that bitch killed your husband. Also, apparently, she said that the board told Nancy that if she didn't stop Clotilde, that Nancy would be next. So Nancy went to Clotilde's house, confronted her for being a witch, pulled out a hammer and beat her to death, then stuffed a chloroform-soaked paper down her throat for good measure. Because chloroform, if you overdose on it, it actually kills you. It doesn't just put you to sleep. So there was a quote from the Forest Lawn Cemetery website. Henry Marchand, who admitted Jimerson was one of his many lovers, too many to count, he said, including a number of Native Americans. He said it was a professional necessity to seduce these, I'm saying Indian women because that's in the quote, but in his quote,
yes.
But, Native Americans, because it made them more willing to pose naked for his diorama modeling. He said his wife consented to his free love lifestyle.
Oh, no.
I mean, we don't know whether it's true or not that his wife was consented, acknowledged, knew about the arrangement with the mistresses or whatever. So that bit we can't really judge or comment on. But just the fact of like, oh, I have to seduce them so that they can pose naked for me for my dioramas. Like,
so it makes him think that he likes and loves them or whatever, and then
to get them more comfortable to take off their clothes, which is just gross, isn't it? It's just gross.
It is.
So Nancy and Leela both accepted the charge of manslaughter. Remember, Leela supposedly wasn't even there, but she is the one that basically told Nancy to go ahead and do it via the Ouija board. Henri was never charged, even though both women tried to implicate him. He moved to Albany and married his dead wife's 18-year-old niece.
Oh, my.
Which, again, nothing illegal about that. But it's just another little gross detail about this guy. Yeah. So we don't know if he was a murderer or not, but we do know he was a piece of shit. Right?
Sounds that way, doesn't it?
Yeah. So, right, I've got another story for you. This is about 25-year-old Anthony Hall, who was dating 16-year-old Bunny Dixon. This is in the States, by the way, where the age of consent is largely 18. Here in the UK, it's 16. So it wouldn't be illegal here in the UK. It would be a bit gross, but not illegal.
Yeah.
In the States, I'm going to presume it was illegal, this relationship, but also a little bit gross. And I say that as the 16-year-old that went out with 25-year-olds. But now that I am older and I look back, I realize, there's a reason why you went out with young girls. It's because no one your age was interested in you because you're immature, weird, stupid, whatever.
It's not a flattering look, is it, for a man?
No. And I'm so happy and lucky. I mean, this might come, but none of my guy friends have ever had a really inappropriate, or in my opinion, inappropriate age difference with a partner. Because I don't know how I'd react. I don't know if, like, when I was 25, if one of my guys was like, here, I'm dating a 15-year-old. Oh, I know if it was illegal and really wrong, I'd be like, that is disgusting. You're a pedophile, basically. And now I'm approaching 40. I don't have any friends that are dating like 20-year-olds or whatever. It'll probably happen at some point. Anyways, sorry, little rant about age differences. Don't get me started on the hypocrisy of how people comment on the age difference when it's the man that's older versus when the woman is older. So my point being that where they are, this was probably legal, but definitely a little bit gross. So both Anthony Hall and his girlfriend, Bunny Dixon, were fascinated by Satanism and the occult. No judgment there. I am too. And this was in the States at the height of satanic panic. So this is the summer of 1983. We had it a little bit here, didn't we? But satanic panic was a fucking huge thing. The thing that people, unless they've lived in or traveled around a lot of the States, and I don't mean New York, LA, and the usual places people go to on holiday, but the States is very religious.
Yes.
Large parts of it are very religious, and different branches of Christianity in particular that are very conservative. There was a nationwide fear that, you know, as there was this rise in like rock music and whatever, that it was putting kids in touch with the devil, and that, you know, all this shit about like play a record backwards and it summons a demon and blah, blah, blah. And when kids would go missing or when there would be murders, people always automatically thought, first of all, oh, this was for a satanic ritual. Then it carried on when you had things like horrible situations like Columbine, which was in the late 90s, but where the, you know, for those of you who don't remember or weren't alive at the time, was when 2 kids shot up their school and a bunch of people were killed. They were into their heavy metal. They were into Marilyn Manson and a bunch of other bands like that. And the music they listened to got more of the blame for their actions and their mental health than the fact that they had access to all these weapons as teenagers. Us over here.
Because famous for wanting to look anywhere but at the guns.
Yeah. So that was the tail end of Satanic Panic. I don't think it's definitely not as big a thing these days. It still happens. So this is at the height of that. Bunny told her boyfriend and their friends, 24-year-old Daniel Bowen and his 18-year-old girlfriend, Elizabeth Town, that a 10-year-old boy spirit called David had communicated with her via Ouija board. He wanted them to leave their home in Florida and join the circus in Virginia. I mean, if this is true, then this 10-year-old spirit boy is clearly fucking pranking them. He's like, let's see what we can get these idiots to do. I'm going to make them join the fucking circus in Virginia. Ha ha. It seems like a very random request.
It does, doesn't it?
But then apparently the spirit boy, David, told Bunny that in order to fund this trip, because remember, they're like kids and early adults, they would have to rob and murder a motorist.
Murder?
Why has it got to be murder?
Yeah, why murder? I mean, the robbing bit, all right, okay, you little shits want to just get some money, but
murder is next level and doesn't mean that you get more money from it. So the 2 girls, they pretend that they are hitchhiking while their scum of the earth boyfriends hid in the bushes. And when 25-year-old Ngok Van Dang, I hope I'm saying that right, stopped to pick up the girls, the boys jumped out, stole $111 from him, which, I mean, I know it was more back in 1983, but it's still very little. Not that it would be better if they stole more, but you know what I mean? It just seems like so pointless over such a stupid amount of money. They then bound and gagged him, drove him to an isolated area in his own car, because they've stolen that. They carved an inverted cross on Dang's chest, and then they made him run away in the woods while they chased him and shot him 11 times. They hunted him. So they took the car. By the time they reached North Carolina, so they're not quite yet in Virginia, these fucking idiots, they split up for whatever reason. They go their own way, because remember, we've got 2 couples here. Daniel Bowen and Elizabeth Town called the police and said that they had witnessed a murder. You didn't fucking witness it. You took part in it. They led the police to the crime scene, and then the other 2 were picked up soon after. All 4 were tried for the murder.
Right. So the police didn't go with the "we saw a murder."
We witnessed a murder, guys. I imagine they were saying, like, we witnessed these guys, the other couple commit the murder. We were scared for our lives. We got away as soon as we could. We reported to you as soon as we could. So Hall and Bowen got life sentences, while Dixon and Town got lesser sentences. That's the couples that reported it to police. I imagine because they were cooperative and they helped them find the crime scene and the idea didn't stem from them, all this kind of stuff. So Dixon got 50 years, which is still a pretty long time. And Elizabeth Town got 17 years, considerably less than the others. Awful story. Oh, no, actually, sorry, I've got that all wrong. So the 2 guys got life sentences while the 2 girls got lesser sentences. Bunny Dixon got 50 years and Elizabeth Town got 17. So Bunny got 50 years instead of life, which I'm guessing they proved that it wasn't her that actually shot the guy, but it was her idea. She's the one that said, oh, the Ouija board told me, David told me through the Ouija board that we got to do this. So I'm going to tell you about one more case. And it's a case where the Ouija board is involved in a slightly different way. This comes from an article by Heather Mills. I wonder if it's Heather Mills that married Paul McCartney.
I'm going to say I've heard that name before.
Article in The Independent. A 35-year-old Stephen Young from Kent was exactly like those kind of insurance brokers that we know that try to deflect from the fact that they have very boring jobs by making them sound more interesting by having a kooky hobby. Except that Stephen took it one step too far and turned to murder to make himself more interesting. In 1994, he was given a life sentence for murdering newlyweds Harry and Nicola Fuller in their own home in East Sussex. But he was granted a retrial when something cuckoo bananas was revealed. It was revealed that during the original trial, where he was convicted of the murder and given life sentence, that the jury consulted with a Ouija board before finding him guilty.
The jury
couldn't find whether it was that they were trying to contact the murder victims to find out what happened to them, or just the spiritual world in general, who in theory might have this answer about whether he did it or not. But that's weird, isn't it? Have you ever heard anything like it?
I haven't. Yeah. So they couldn't do anything but throw out the conviction there,
right? So the decision was that they had broken their oath to try the case solely according to evidence and facts. But you'll be pleased to know there was a retrial and Stephen Young was found guilty a second time because he had clearly done it.
Yeah. Oh, dear, dear. So those are some horrible, horrible stories.
You're welcome. And so again, it's like, even in those crimes that are committed, it's hard to tell whether the people using these Ouija boards as a defense for their actions, whether they actually believe it or they're using it as as an excuse, like it wasn't me, whether they're trying to prove that they're insane in some cases and that that's why they were listening to the Ouija board. What's your opinion of Ouija boards now?
I do think in all of those stories, Dee, that we've got some humans with mental health issues. The board having a reputation being used to manipulate, but I genuinely do not think that it can be real. It's just a manufactured item. And if you were a spirit at the other side, would you cooperate with that sort of thing? Or would you just... It doesn't seem a natural thing, does it, to spell things out?
If I was a spirit, I would still want to go through someone like a medium or something rather than just a bunch of amateur people having a laugh.
And who likes spelling?
I mean, I'm dyslexic, so when I pass over to the spirit world, I will not be contacting anyone via Ouija board.
Some people's spelling is atrocious, and maybe that's how you'd know it was your granddad if he spells something like that. I don't know, but personally, I think it's just fun. I think I might just keep one as a decoration, actually.
I want to see this glow-in-the-dark one. Oh, yeah, it'd be great Halloween party decoration, wouldn't it?
It would.
And I can't see it as, like, intrinsically evil.
No, that as well, because if I can't see it as, like, real, then how could it be evil?
All right, well, thank you, everyone, for listening. Thank you, Michelle, for listening to me rabbit on about Ouija boards. And we will see you all soon. Bye!
Bye!
We Know the Moon is the official podcast for the Goddess Temple Twickenham. Don't forget, you can find us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and Pinterest. You can also visit our website, weknowthemoon.co.uk, for all of our upcoming events and merch. If you sign up for any amount on our Patreon, you'll be able to watch our video recordings of our podcast from season 4 onwards, with all the raw bits.